This is America's 84th Labor Day, and the American people have more to be happy about today on this Labor Day than on most of its 83 predecessors. This session of Congress has produced more constructive legislation than any other Congress in the nation's history. Medicare, federal aid to education, voting rights. The list is just too long to recite. Moreover, the longest sustained period of general prosperity the country has ever enjoyed is still continuing. Business profits are setting new records that border on the fantastic. Wages have risen, though on a more modest scale. Unemployment, while still too high, has dropped to the lowest level in 8 years. Therefore, it may seem strange to you that I am going to take the next few minutes to talk about the possibility, and the very real possibility, of economic difficulties. It may seem strange, but it makes sense. It makes sense because all of us who are sharing in this era of social progress and economic well-being want it to continue and to expand still further. We want more of it for ourselves and even more of it for our children. It makes sense because, as the American people have good reason to know, it is far easier and far better to avert a depression than to cure one. So if there is a real possibility of difficulties ahead, the time for action is now, while America is flourishing. Now let me turn to the possibility itself, to the problem which I am convinced can become a catastrophe unless plans are made now and steps now taken to solve it. The problem is unemployment. And the possibilities, the very real possibilities, is that in the very near future it will engulf this affluent society and plunge the nation into another economic problem. I want to make one thing clear. I don't believe this is going to happen, but I do believe, or to put it more strongly, I know that it can happen unless preventive measures are promptly taken. There are two major forces involved in this problem, and they are on collision course. One is the unprecedented annual increase in the number of Americans who want and need jobs. This is not just the normal increase expected in a growing country. This is a far greater than normal increase. It is the inevitable result of the baby boom that followed World War II, for those babies are now coming of age. In order to find work for them, the nation would need to create 1.5 million new jobs a year, 30,000 every week, even if there is no other complications. But there is another complication, a mighty important one. It is the second of the two major forces I mentioned a moment ago. It is called automation. I realize that automation has been talked about for a long time. The word has become part of the language. It is freely used by people who don't know what it really means. In fact, it has wrongly become a synonym in popular usage for any kind of technological change or any kind of labor-saving machinery. This is unfortunate because it conceals rather than exposes the real meaning of automation. There is a tendency for people to say, oh yes, automation, I guess it's here to stay, but it really hasn't hurt us much. The fact is, my friends, that automation hasn't even started, except in a very limited way. As an automation engineer once told a magazine writer just a few months ago, you ain't seen nothing yet. I can speak on this subject with a certain amount of authority. In the first place, our union operates in an industry, the telephone industry, which is among the 2 or 3 in America where real automation has been applied. In the second place, as a member of the President's Commission on Automation, I have had access to broad information and pending developments all across the nation. Because I might be accused of self-interest, I don't talk about automation in telephones. I will give you some other examples instead. In a bakery that turns out frozen cakes for the national market, cakes which most of you have eaten, production has doubled. while employment has gone up only 8%. Electronic computers and control devices now do what bakers used to do. A single computer device in a daily newspaper will do the work of 10 printers, whose basic wages is $149 a week. Automated equipment will enable new cargo ships to reduce crews by 40%. A new automated steel mill set up by an auto company will turn out the same quantity and quality of metal with half as many workers. Even these examples are primitive. In typesetting, we are told the goal is the elimination of all handwork. And so it goes not only in manufacturing, but in business offices and banks and virtually every human activity except the creative arts. Even there, as you may have seen in the newspapers, some imaginative technicians have been able to get the computers to write poetry. This, of course, was simply a stunt, the basis for a funny story. But there is nothing funny about the uncanny skills of these new devices. Let me emphasize again that automation is not just another name for new machinery that increases the hourly production of workers. Automation is the science of making workers unnecessary where it is used. In the immediate sense, automation poses the greatest threat to those with the least skills, the school dropouts and the deprived members of minority groups. It is no accident that these groups comprise the largest segment of the presently unemployed. But in the longer run, and not a very long run at that, the impact of automation will be less selective. The graduate engineer, who has built a career on his skill in analyzing and evaluating alternative programs, may find that a computer has replaced him. The office manager, expert in planning and assigning the flow of work, uncanny in his ability to detect errors, may find an electronic calculator where his desk used to be. I am not exaggerating, but neither am I trying to make a case against automation. Not at all. Automation can do all the beneficial things that are claimed for it: an end to human drudgery, a limitless supply of boundless variety of goods, new horizons in human well-being. Automation can indeed be the foundation for a society of unprecedented plenty, but only if Americans make it so. Let me quote from one of the nation's outstanding scientists and educators, the father of the atomic submarine, Admiral Rickover. He said, "A society is free when it centers on man. That is, when it gives paramount consideration to human rights, interests, and needs. Powerful forces are driving us towards a pattern of life in which technology, rather than man, would be central to the purpose of our society. That is a tactic assumption whenever technology contravenes human desires, that man must adapt himself to technology instead of technology being made to serve man. When technology is viewed in this lopsided fashion, it becomes a threat to our free society. We have allowed this threat to arise. It is now up to us to overcome it." That was Admiral Rickover. We in the AFLCIO share these sentiments. We say that automation, like the conventional technological changes that preceded it and are still going forward, must serve the best interests of all the people. Over the years, the labor movement has sought this objective through two kinds of action: through collective bargaining with union-organized companies, and through legislation that would ensure at least a minimum standard of life for all Americans. We propose to meet the challenge of automation with the same weapons, more broadly applied. In collective bargaining, a number of unions have already protected the jobs of their members against the inroads of automation. Without demanding the employment of unnecessary workers, they have negotiated terms that safeguard the future of present employees through a variety of imaginative and constructive devices. But these efforts, worthy as they are, do not meet the problems I described earlier. They do not help the workers displaced from jobs in less enlightened enterprises, and they do nothing at all for the huge influx of youngsters into the labor force. To meet these needs, and they are vital needs, a national effort, a legislative effort, is essential. Fortunately, during the last few years, a start has been made. Education and training for both youth and adults has been enormously broadened and expanded. There is a clear national determination that the unskilled worker will become extinct as soon as the unskilled job. The concept of broad public assistance to specific areas suffering from unavoidable economic handicaps, in other words, the redevelopment of depressed areas, is now generally accepted. The need for government to plan ahead to meet changing conditions, once denounced as socialistic foolishness, is now recognized by hard-headed businessmen as well as by academic theorists. Most important of all, there is an ever-growing realization that the federal government must act as well as plan, that the national government has a positive responsibility to promote prosperity and full employment. It can be said, I think, that in recent years the nation has developed the tools to avert the catastrophe of another depression, despite the combined pressures of more and more workers on the one hand and the destruction of jobs on the other. But these tools must be used. They must be used boldly, and they must be used without delay. In particular, a start must soon be made towards the reduction in the standard work week to 35 hours. All the evidence, and there is a great deal of it, indicates that no matter what else is done, no matter how many needed public facilities are built, or how many unskilled persons are trained, the time will very soon arrive when there are simply not enough 40-hour jobs to go around. The 40-hour work week has stood for nearly 30 years. It has been a profoundly important instrument of economic and social progress. It was a shining successor to the 60-hour week, the 50-hour week, the 48-hour week. Now, by the inexorable demands of change, it too must yield. Only when this happens, as I am sure it will, can all of us be truly assured that on future labor days, we and our children will enjoy a still greater share in the fruits of progress than we do today.
This is the CBS Radio Network.